Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630.
WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL Morning Majority, Friday morning.
He said the era of small government was over. That sounds a lot more like Barack Obama, if you ask me.
Fight, fight, fight. She said she's got a titanium spine. It's not her spine we're worried about. It's her record of results. If that's your view of effective leadership with results, please stop because you're killing us.
A little back and forth there between
No, he didn't.
Wow, that was mean. It was a fun debate last night to watch on television. Susan Ferrechio joins us now from the Washington Examiner, one of the panelists last night.
Right.
Asked some of the questions. So, Susan, for us, a lot of fireworks, it seemed, in our living rooms. How was it for you sitting there on the podium?
Boy, I had the best seat in the house, I'll tell you. I really did. I was right in the middle there watching these guys go back and forth. It was like a really good tennis match, I thought. And it was fantastic. It was great to see some sparks finally. I mean, these past two debates, everyone's been pulling their punches and saying, I don't want to say anything about, the guy standing next to me, even though I'm running against him. And now finally, we got to see them go at it. And so it was great.
I have to ask you, because you got the question after Newt Gingrich kind of went off on Chris Wallace. If you were thinking to yourself, oh, man, is he going to think this is a gotcha question as well? What was going through your mind when you were asking that question to Newt?
As soon as Gingrich fired that torpedo, I looked at my list and I'm like, now, what's on my list that's going to get me in that
Right.
Absolutely. That was a pretty harsh move on his part.
I think he's running against Chris Wallace. Is that the...
Well, he said after, he told me that Speaker Gingrich said, he thought he saw the line of questioning headed where it was headed, and that he took advantage of it, and he did, and he has a lot to lose right now. Gingrich is not, running away with this, and he's got to distinguish himself somehow. This is sort of like, I don't know, this debate. You can throw a Hail Mary pass and see what happens. So he's got to do well this weekend. He's got to make some kind of showing to justify his candidacy, because his poll numbers are terrible, and his campaign, he's had his problems, which of course is the reason for Chris's question.
Well, the irony of that, Susan, is that he said that he didn't want to give a scripted answer, didn't want to give his talking points, but that was pre-scripted. They sat around and talked about that. Well, what are we going to do when they ask about it? Well, here's my answer. So it was one of his talking points that he came in to talk about.
That's just a classic response from him too, because he was always, when he was speaker, he could be really defensive and he'd come back at you, and this was just a classic case of that happening, I think. And for sure they talked about that, because they knew a question like that was going to come. And people say, well, it's been asked over and over, but really, has he really addressed the fact that his campaign has really just been a bit of a disaster? Why should anyone give him any money? Why should anyone vote for him if it's just not salvageable?
Right.
I thought it was a very legitimate question.
Mm-hmm. Susan, there was a national audience for this debate, obviously, but I wonder, being in Iowa, how much you think the voters there, how much this will affect their Ames straw poll participation or the view of the candidates actually in the state?
Here's how it could. I talked to so many voters, and really so few people vote in this, and of course the vast majority of people I talked to said they weren't coming to this thing. But there were people who were thinking about it, though. And for those people, they might watch this debate and say, you know what? I'm going to get out there and go vote for Michelle Bachmann or Rick Santorum. This motivates me to get in my car and drive 2 hours to Ames and get into the mess there and vote. But then there were also other people who maybe thought, I thought I was going to get out there and vote for Pawlenty or for Huntsman, but well, probably not Huntsman in Iowa, but I don't know. Forget it. So it could affect the outcome. But this thing, of course, the straw poll, you're talking 10,000 people are going to come. Yeah. So it very well could. For a number that small, these debate performances are critical.
And what about Pawlenty? Did he make up any ground last night, distinguishing himself? What do you think his effect was?
Well, first of all, you can't say he whiffed on this one with Bachmann.
No.
For him, he had to throw some punches. Now, he didn't really throw any punches at Romney. I thought I was curious. He and Bachmann, he had no problem suddenly. When he started going after Bachmann, I was like, oh, finally, because even out on the campaign trail, he wouldn't do it. Even when she wasn't around, he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't mention her by name, like, okay, here we go. And then when it came to the Romney care question again, he looked so uncomfortable and a little bit I don't know, hesitant to go after Romney again. I mean, he did, but it was still not really the kind of fireworks you would expect. So I thought that was interesting how he went after one more than the other.
Susan, this was a huge victory for Fox News and a huge victory for your organization, which co-sponsored the event. You guys did a great job. You knocked it out of the park. But I have had the pleasure of actually being behind the scenes as you prepare for one of these Fox News debates. I want you to give the audience some sense of how much preparation goes in. I mean, you basically lock yourselves away for most of the day as you lay out who's going to ask what question. There's a lot of effort that goes into it.
Yeah, and we do that locking away for weeks. I mean, we get together constantly, and we sit in a room, all of us, the panelists and you know, some of the editors that you know there, Brian, and we just go over the questions, and we start real broad, and then as the weeks go by, we get narrower and narrower, and then, of course, you come up with a lot of this stuff late in the game because it's dictated by news events and things. You don't want to have, you know, stale questions. And so it is very intense. It's sitting in a room and going over it, and sometimes it's sitting around talking about one word in one question for 20 minutes. Well, maybe we shouldn't use that word. Maybe we should change. That's really what it comes down to. It's a total collaborative effort, and like each of us is responsible for certain segments, but we all contribute to the outcome of each question.
And I think that's important for people to know, that this is not something you just kind of throw together at the last minute. There is so much thought that goes into it may look like it's easy, but it's really not.
It's not like this show, is what he's saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Was there anything that surprised you last night?
Well, I thought the Gingrich retort threw me for a loop. I thought, they didn't tell us this was going to happen. But I thought surprising. Santorum was really on his game, and you know, not to say we were discounting him. He's really at the bottom of the polls, and the way he just kept inserting himself, and he was doing it successfully. He really was. He was really making a name for himself with that debate. That to me was notable, and also, of course, the Bachmann-Plenty sparks, which I thought were fantastic, and that was more than I had dreamed for in terms of trying to get these guys finally to engage with each other.
Bachmann sticking to her guns that she would not raise the debt ceiling under any circumstances. It seems to me that that's a place where you can pick on her to say, is that really a smart economic philosophy? And nobody went there. Nobody else challenged her on that about what would exactly have happened had we not raised the debt ceiling. Where would we be right now? Now,
Huntsman said, we asked her that question, and one of the questions we asked was that, you know, what about experts saying that people's 401ks would be even worse off right now? And she gave an answer I kind of predicted she would, which is that, well, we did raise the debt ceiling, and now look at the stock market. But then Huntsman came back later and he said, you know, we can't be a nation that defaults. And he went after her, but not by name. He just said, you know, we are absolutely not going to be a nation that defaults. That's a ridiculous concept. And we, you know, so I think he did, and I think Ron Paul did, but not directly going after her saying, you know, Congresswoman Bachmann, the fact that you weren't going to raise the debt ceiling makes you really not credible. Nobody said and did that, so I see your point. I think that would have been a good thing for one of them to do.
Well, really enjoyed the debate, Susan. I look forward to some more of those, perhaps, from the Examiner and Fox.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. We had a great time.
All right.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks for coming on, Susan. Appreciate it.
Sure, thanks a lot.